Think about what you did this morning. You woke up and, without thinking about it, you opened your eyes. The room came into focus. You read something. Maybe you checked the time. Maybe you looked out a window. Maybe the light coming through the curtains registered clearly. Maybe you saw the outline of a chair across the room, the face of someone you love, the screen of your phone, the color of the sky. Most people never stop to think about how much of daily life depends on that simple act of seeing clearly. Until it begins to change. Not suddenly. Not all at once. Just a quiet, gradual dimming. Words become harder to read. Faces lose a little of their sharpness. Night driving feels more uncomfortable than it used to. Bright headlights linger a little longer. Menus need more light. Screens feel more tiring. The kind of small, ordinary losses that people often dismiss as just part of getting older. And yes, aging is part of the story. But here is something most people do not know. Age-related vision decline is not simply a mechanical failure of the eye. It is also, in a very real and measurable way, a nutritional story. The retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye, is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the human body. It is constantly taking light and converting it into electrical signals your brain can understand. That process is extraordinary. But it is also demanding. It generates oxidative stress every single day. And the lens of the eye is under a different kind of pressure. Years of light exposure. Years of oxidation. Years of subtle chemical wear that build slowly, quietly, often unnoticed until clarity is no longer what it used to be. After 60, the body becomes less efficient in several ways that matter for vision. Blood flow is not quite what it once was. Nutrient delivery becomes less reliable. Antioxidant reserves are not as abundant. And when the nutrients most protective for the eye are not present consistently in the diet, the tissues that support vision simply have less to work with. That means what you eat matters. Not in a vague wellness sense. In a direct biological sense. My name is Dr. Anthony, and I have spent more than 2 decades focused on healthy aging. Today I want to walk you through what I consider the best fruit to eat before bed if your goal is to support healthy eyes as you get older. And I want to be clear from the beginning. This is not a replacement for eye exams. It is not a replacement for medical treatment. It is not a promise of reversal. It is an addition to good care. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make with vision is assuming that they are powerless until a doctor gives them bad news. They are not. And one of the most overlooked opportunities in this entire conversation happens at night. Before I tell you the fruit, I need to give you one framework. Because without it, this will sound like just another healthy food recommendation. And it is not just that. It is about giving a specific tissue-specific compounds at a time when the body is shifting toward repair. I call this the overnight retinal recovery window. And once you understand it, the choice of fruit becomes much more logical. Here is what changes about your eyes as you age. First, the retina accumulates oxidative stress from light exposure over decades. Every single day, light enters the eye and triggers metabolic activity in retinal cells. In a younger body, those cells are supported by stronger antioxidant systems. Over time, that support becomes less robust. The result is simple. The tissue responsible for your vision is doing the same demanding job with less protection than it once had. Second, the macula, the small central part of the retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision, relies heavily on specific carotenoids, especially lutein and zeaxanthin. These compounds are not optional. They act almost like a built-in nutritional filter. They help absorb damaging blue light and help reduce oxidative burden in the exact tissue you depend on for reading, recognizing faces, and seeing detail clearly. And here is the critical point. Your body cannot make them on its own. They must come from food. Third, the lens of the eye depends on antioxidant protection as well, especially vitamin C. In fact, the concentration of vitamin C in the fluid surrounding the lens is unusually high, because the lens needs that protection. Lens proteins are vulnerable to oxidation and glycation over time, and when protective nutrients are lacking, that wear continues quietly in the background. Now here is where evening becomes important. Most people think nutrition works in a general way across the whole day, and of course it does. But nighttime is different. At night, the body shifts away from the demands of movement, work, errands, stimulation, and constant input. It moves toward restoration, repair, rebalancing, recovery. That does not mean your eyes magically heal while you sleep. But it does mean that when the nutrients most relevant to the eye are consistently present in the evening, you are supporting the body during the part of the day when restoration is naturally prioritized. That is why I am not simply talking about the healthiest fruit in general. I am talking about the fruit that makes the most sense before bed for healthy eyes. And in my view, that fruit is kiwi. Now for some people, that answer will be surprising. Because kiwi does not have the glamorous reputation that berries do. It is not marketed as some miracle eye fruit. It does not sound exotic. It is not the food most people would guess if you asked them what protects the retina. But once you look at what kiwi actually delivers, and how easy it is to use consistently at night, it becomes one of the smartest choices in this entire conversation. Most people know kiwi as a vitamin C fruit. That is true. But it undersells what kiwi offers the aging eye. A kiwi gives you a meaningful amount of vitamin C in a small serving. That matters for lens protection. The lens of the eye is exposed to oxidative stress over a lifetime, and vitamin C is one of its major defenses. If that defense becomes weaker over time, the lens becomes more vulnerable to the gradual processes that affect clarity. But kiwi does not stop there. Kiwi also contains lutein and zeaxanthin, the same carotenoids that are central to macular protection. These are the compounds that accumulate in the retina and help create what researchers call macular pigment density, one of the most important markers we have for the eye's natural protection against age-related damage. That means kiwi is doing something very specific. It is not just giving the body antioxidants in a general sense. It is helping provide the exact compounds that the central retina is known to use. And that makes it different from fruits that are healthy but not especially strategic for the eye. I want you to think back 5 or 10 years. Do you remember when reading in ordinary room light was easier? When your eyes felt fresher by the end of the day? When nighttime glare was less irritating? When switching from a bright environment to a darker one did not require that extra moment of adjustment? For many people, that shift happens slowly enough that they hardly notice it. But those changes matter. They are often the quiet early signs that the visual system is under more strain than it used to be. And strain is exactly where nutrition becomes relevant. Because the eye is not asking for magic. It is asking for support. That is one of the reasons I like kiwi so much in this discussion. It is not a dramatic intervention. It is a practical one. And practical interventions are often the ones people actually sustain. Let me explain why that matters. The best nutritional strategy in the world does very little if a person cannot maintain it. People buy supplements they forget to take. They buy specialty foods they stop purchasing after a week. They start ambitious routines that disappear the moment life gets busy. Kiwi is different. It is simple, portable, affordable in many places, easy to portion, easy to eat, no cooking, no complicated preparation, no dependence on perfect motivation. And when it comes to eye health, consistency is everything. Lutein and zeaxanthin do not work like painkillers. You do not take them once and feel a dramatic change. They build. They accumulate. They become relevant over time. Macular protection is a long game. Lens protection is a long game. Healthy vision aging is a long game. That is exactly why kiwi works so well as a bedtime habit. It fits the long game. There is another layer here that many people appreciate once they try it. Kiwi is light enough for the evening. It does not feel heavy. It does not require effort. It is easy to pair with a small amount of yogurt or a few nuts. That small amount of fat may help support the absorption of fat-soluble carotenoids, and from a behavioral standpoint, it turns the fruit into a repeatable nighttime ritual instead of a random food choice. And health habits that become rituals tend to last. Let me make this more practical. If you want to use kiwi as an eye-supportive bedtime fruit, the simplest approach is 2 kiwis in the evening, ideally about an hour before bed. You can eat them on their own. You can slice them into a small bowl of plain yogurt. You can pair them with a few almonds or walnuts. The point is not perfection. The point is regularity. Because this is where people often go wrong. They hear a recommendation, they try it twice, and then they decide it did nothing. That is not how this works. What protects the eye usually works quietly, gradually, cumulatively. It is not dramatic enough for most people to appreciate in a single night, but it becomes meaningful over weeks and months because the tissues involved respond to steady support, not random exposure. In other words, the eye is not rewarded by intensity. It is rewarded by consistency. And that is what makes kiwi so effective. Not just its nutrient profile, but the fact that its nutrient profile can actually be delivered reliably. I also want to point out something that is often missed in conversations about eye nutrition. Most people focus only on what foods contain, not whether those foods fit real life. But if a food is too inconvenient, too seasonal, too expensive, too rare, or too easy to forget, it often fails as a real intervention even if it looks good on paper. Kiwi passes the real-life test. That matters. Now I want to pause here and say something important. This is not about claiming that one fruit solves every vision problem. It does not. If you have cataracts, macular degeneration, glaucoma, diabetic eye disease, sudden changes in vision, flashes, floaters, eye pain, or rapidly worsening eyesight, that requires proper medical attention. But many people are living in the earlier stage than that. The stage where nothing feels catastrophic, but something feels different. More strain. More glare. More dryness. More fatigue. More dependence on brighter light. Less ease. That is the stage where support matters most. That is the stage where a person still has the most to protect. And that is why I prefer to talk about foods before people become desperate. Because by the time vision changes feel serious, the underlying processes have often been developing for years. So let us talk about what you may realistically notice if you start using kiwi consistently before bed. I am not talking about miracles. I am talking about subtler things. For some people, the earliest change is not sharper vision itself. It is less visual fatigue in the evening. Less of that heavy, tired feeling after reading or looking at a screen. Less of that sense that the eyes are working harder than they should for ordinary tasks. For others, the first thing they notice is comfort. Their eyes feel less strained. Reading feels a little less irritating. Brightness feels slightly less aggressive. The improvements are often quiet, but that does not make them unimportant. In preventive health, quiet improvements are often the most believable ones because they reflect real physiology. And that brings us to one more reason kiwi is strong in this role. It addresses more than one mechanism at once. Vitamin C helps support the lens. Lutein and zeaxanthin support the macula. Natural antioxidants support the broader oxidative burden the eye manages every day. And all of that comes in one fruit that can be eaten in 2 minutes without turning your life upside down. That combination is rare. Not because other fruits are not healthy. Many are. But kiwi sits at a very useful intersection of nutrient relevance, ease, and timing. That is why, if you asked me for one fruit to prioritize before bed for healthy eyes, kiwi would be very close to the top of the list. Now let me give you the common mistakes people make with it. The first mistake is inconsistency. They eat it occasionally instead of regularly. The second mistake is using too little, too rarely, and expecting too much. If you have one kiwi every 10 days, that is not a strategy. That is an accident. The third mistake is forgetting that the eye does not work in isolation. If a person is sleeping poorly, living on ultra-processed foods, constantly dehydrated, not getting regular eye exams, and has uncontrolled blood sugar or blood pressure, no fruit is going to overpower that. Kiwi is a support. It is not a substitute for fundamentals. The fourth mistake is ignoring absorption. Pairing kiwi with a small amount of healthy fat, such as nuts or yogurt, can be a practical way to make the evening habit more supportive overall. And the fifth mistake is waiting until vision decline feels frightening before doing anything at all. That is the mistake I would most like people to avoid. Because the body responds best to protection that begins before the sense of urgency arrives. So here is the simplest way to test this in your own life. For the next 30 days, eat 2 kiwis in the evening at least 5 nights each week. Before you begin, write down 2 things. First, on a scale from 1 to 10, how comfortable do your eyes feel after a full evening of reading, television, or screen use? Second, how easy is it right now to read ordinary printed text in normal room light without adjusting the angle, the brightness, or the distance? Then after 30 days, check again. Do not look for a miracle. Look for direction. Do your eyes feel less tired? Do they feel more supported? Is evening reading a little easier? Is there less strain by the end of the day? That is how meaningful nutritional change often begins. Not dramatically, but measurably enough that you realize something is improving. And if you are serious about protecting your vision, bring better questions to your next eye appointment. Ask this. Am I showing any early signs that my macula or lens is under more stress than expected for my age? Is my current diet likely to be giving me enough lutein, zeaxanthin, and vitamin C to support long-term eye health? And given what you see in my eyes now, are there nutritional strategies worth prioritizing before more significant changes develop? Those are useful questions. Because too many adults have been taught to think of eye care only in terms of prescriptions, procedures, or problems that have already appeared. But nutrition belongs in the conversation much earlier than that. The eye is living tissue. Living tissue responds to what it is given. And after 60, that reality matters even more. There is a difference between waiting for decline and feeding resilience. There is a difference between reacting late and supporting early. There is a difference between hoping your eyes hold up and giving them something they actually use. That is what this is about. Not hype. Not false promises. Not pretending one fruit changes everything. Just one smart, repeatable decision made at the right time, for the right reason, in support of a tissue that serves you every waking hour of your life. If you want the best fruit to eat before bed for healthy eyes, I would start here. Kiwi. Simple enough to use. Specific enough to matter. And gentle enough to become part of your life without resistance. The people who protect their health best over time are usually not the ones who made one dramatic change. They are the ones who found one simple habit worth repeating and kept it long enough for the body to benefit. Healthy vision works the same way. Not all at once. But day by day. Night by night. Choice by choice. And if this gave you something useful, do not just agree with it. Use it. Start tonight.